Hey, it's David. Let's get on with this headlight build. At the end of the last video, you will remember that I said I'd made a mistake in putting this together. Now, the cause of that was simply that I was making up as I was going along. I hadn't got a definitive plan, so of course I overlooked something. Let me show you what I did. These are the idiot lights, and what I'd intended to do was do what I did before and mount them underneath so that I could see them through the hole. But you will also remember that what I said was I didn't like that because these bottom parts here and the wiring smacks into the bottom of the headlight bowl and restricts its movement. Plus it looks downright ugly. So what I intended to do was to get rid of this bracket and bolt these idiot lights directly into the new plate that I've made under here, except that when I cut it off in order to be able to fit it, because there's a curve here, I cut it too short because when I cut it I thought, yeah, that's about where I want to cut it off here, forgetting I needed it longer in the middle. As it happens, not a problem, because I don't actually want it there for exactly the reason I said I don't want it there, because it gets in the way, it's ugly and so forth. So what I'm going to have to do is put it back up here so it will sit on the top of the headlight mount, on top of the yoke here, and then I'm just going to have to make up a plate to cover up the fronts of this so that it looks a bit better. Plus it has another benefit. What I'd said, if you go back to the start of the last video, was I tried out different things to give it a different look, and one of the things I was looking at was some box section so that it would mount off the top here and have this mount at the bottom, so that there was some additional strength in this. Now it still moves a little bit here, and some of that is play because I haven't tightened up these nuts. But what I used to have before, when I was riding down the road, I'd look down and I could see the headlight doing this. Independently of the forks, which are stable, it was doing this, because this is just somewhat floppy. And I don't think it's this bracket here. I think even though I've actually cut off this part of it here, the sort of eyebrow part that's so distinctive of a Sportster headlamp mount, I think the problem was in here where I had these little tubes clamped to the top of here, and the only thing holding this together was the friction of the slightly undersized bolts tight against here. And I think there was enough movement in the top of these little tubes against the underside of these forks that it allowed it to just vibrate a little bit. So by putting a plate on top of here and welding it down to here, it's going to create an additional bracket which is going to give this a little bit more stability. So all in all, it's working out really well. So what I need to do now is to take this apart so that I can place it on here and then start mocking up. One of the things I'm going to need to do is to straighten this up, because when I made it before, it's probably not that obvious on here, I did it by eye, and this side is about 1 mil higher than this side. So one of the things I need to do is just grind a straight edge right across there that I can weld the new plate to. So let's get into it. We have to remember to get this the right way around, and there are little notches, 2 in the bottom, 1 in the top, that match up with the pinholes here. You can just, there they are. So they match up with pinholes that are in this backing plate. The LED, or the bulbs in there, are white, so that gives you your colour coding. So what I'm doing is I've cut a notch out the bottom here because the clearance between the back of this and this is really tight. Now I put this as far back as I could deliberately to reduce the wobble or the bend in this piece of plate. The shorter this piece of plate, the stronger it is. There's less leverage of the headlight bending it. So to get this behind there, I've had to cut out a notch so that it fits around the back of this. But for now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grind some of this off so that it sits below the top level of this, and then I consider putting a 45 degree across both of them, and then I can weld across the two. So grinding. Well, at the start I had the wire speed too low. After that, it wasn't too bad. A bit hesitant towards the end. Seems to be okay. So once this is cooled off enough to handle it, I'm going to grind that down and see what it looks like. So that's the initial weld done of this part of the bracket. The only thing that are going to be joining the top and the bottom are these two tiny bits of metal, so I'm going to have to think about maybe some extra reinforcements. We'll see. I can't weld in here because of the holes, they're too close to the edge. With this roughed out, now I can move my attention back to the bottom of the bracket and get some more shaping done on that. So, bracket's now mocked up. It's pretty much complete. A lot of finishing to do, but it's pretty much complete. So, I've cut away a cutout here, so you've got a bit of visual through there. I've kept as much reinforcing as I can because there's only the thickness of this piece of steel. stopping it from flexing up and down. I have considered putting a lip of metal along here to add additional reinforcement and to cover up these nuts. I don't think it needs it, and if you look underneath these, there's all sorts of nuts holding stuff on, so I don't think that's necessarily a big issue. But if it is, then I can take the bracket back off and I can modify it, so that's no big deal. So it all seems okay. It seems quite rigid. There's a little bit of movement in there, but again, I haven't torqued these nuts down, or these bolts down, so yeah, I don't know. We'll see. If it doesn't work, I'll throw it away and we'll start again, so no big deal. What I need to do now is attach the top part of the bracket to the bottom, so I'm going to run a tack in here and a tack in here while it's on the bike. I am just going to drop this off, drop those couple of tacks in because I don't want to melt the forks, the yokes or this, so I'm going to drop this off, tack this in and then weld it up properly. Here's the plate bracket in its final form. There's some cleaning up in the corners there I need to do before I can paint it, but it's not going to be cosmetically great because there are some gaps here. Now I could drop some weld into these and refile down and so forth, but functionally it's there. And if you look at the original factory Harley finish, that wasn't great either. So you can chase perfection, but this is not a show bike. Now, depending on how much it bounces going down the road will depend on what I do next. But what I need to do now is just do a little bit more clean up on this and get a coat of paint on it so that it won't rust, and I can put it aside with my other pile of bits that need painting and so forth, and we'll go from there. Right, so I've given this a clean over with thinners, which will have removed all the fingerprints and the grease and the oil from the visible surfaces, but there's a lot of hidden corners and down in the welds and stuff where that thinners won't have got, and where it's likely that there is still some grease and contaminants. So in this case I'm just going to heat it and see if I can burn off any residual grease on this, and then it's time for paint. The bracket, if you can see it here, is now done. A little bit of paint, maybe a bit more, a little bit of fettling to actually make it fit with the paint on, but it's basically done. So now we can move on with the build and get back to the frame. So thanks very much for watching, and I will catch you guys again soon.